Get it started. Welcome to episode 7 of DE&TH Diaries. We're here with Eddy, one of the brightest students on this podcast. He's from BYU. He currently works as a system administrator. He's worked as a SOC analyst previously, network security intern, and he's here to teach us the math behind the hunt. We're really excited to have him here. We first followed him after he gave a talk at BSides Salt Lake City, and he's going to be teaching us a lot today.
Hey Andy, hey Richie. Kind of excited to be here and very nervous at the same time actually. So like they said, yeah, I'm a student. I go to BYU, Idaho, so the other BYU school. Um, and um, I like math. So if I did not find cybersecurity as a passion early on in my college career, I'd have probably been a math major. But at the time, I was like, what am I going to do in math? I don't want to be a professor. Um, if I knew that you could do a lot of things with math, I probably would not have been a cybersecurity major. But I'm glad I found cybersecurity and I enjoyed. Um, so I took a stats class and I was like, oh wow, this is really cool stuff. And I thought, how can I apply um, this concept I'm learning in the statistics class to threat hunting, to something that will be actually more relevant to me, not just some random business survey or whatever, right? Um, so this kind of like a little bit about me here. The only thing that I think is important to know about me is um, I like to play soccer. I like to watch it. I like to talk about it. And so if you want to see me in my natural element, um, kind of catch me on the soccer pitch or something, and that's where you see like the real Eddie. But um, so yeah,
Before
let's kind of get into it here.
Before this podcast, Eddie kind of teased how you would be explaining statistics to us, and he kind of said, "Hey, I'm going to be using soccer terms." So one thing I really look forward to is that you like math, you like threat hunting, you like soccer. You're combining all of those things into a presentation. And honestly, there's no reason you should be nervous. You've already given a talk at B-Sides. That's bigger
Yeah.
than anything we've done. So great job on that.
It
Yeah.
was nerve-wracking, but thanks. So I kind of started thinking, like a lot of people who are kind of like experienced or who have good amount of like skill and knowledge for like threat hunting, like sometimes they kind of go with like gut feeling. Yeah, like, oh, I know that this is something weird going on here. But the truth is that sometimes it's kind of hard to explain that gut feeling to somebody else, right? It's kind of hard to explain, oh, I know that something is going bad. How do you like provide concrete evidence for that? I mean, most really good ones know how to do that, but sometimes it's just kind of hard to explain why you feel like something's bad. Um, and to be honest, like us that are students, right? Imagine someone who's trying, imagine someone try to explain, oh, this is why this is bad, but there's no like something concrete explaining why that is bad or why that might be suspicious, right? It's kind of hard to train junior analysts or like work with other team members based on just gut feeling. But the nice thing about math is very concrete, tangible, it's very reproducible, right? One plus one is two all the time, right? Doesn't matter where you're going to avoid orbits to. And so if you can apply those math, some certain like math or statistic concept to kind of explain why something might be um, abnormal or suspicious or bad to you, um, then whoever you're working with can better understand that. And if you need to talk to like leadership about that, like you have concrete proof, right? Most people trust anything math numbers, right? They can have a little bit more faith in that. And so if you're able to show them, oh, this is why I believe this is bad, this is why I believe this is suspicious, um, it can boost our credibility and then it can also help again train other analysts like and so I think that's one of the reasons why I kind of thought about this talk is providing more concrete evidence to kind of support why certain things are bad. Even though at the start you might not know if it's bad or not, but um, again, time is very, very important in our field, right? You want to be able to like, you want to make sure that you're on top of things quickly, and so these simple like statistical concepts can help you um, take action quickly, and then later on you can better prove, oh, this is why, because we're able to see all of this. But at the start, we're able to kind of get a good idea of that just because of certain mathematical concept we're able to apply. So
Cool. Yeah. Honestly, this is a feeling a bunch of defenders have. They have a gut feeling that something's going wrong. And this kind of ties into something I was researching earlier, and that's how to communicate to people, to leadership, to your fellow analysts, and having something that backs up what you're saying, like statistical concepts, is so important when you can find the exact indicator of compromise or something very particular to look for, because that takes a lot of time. So if you're coming with just evidence or context outside of that, that's going to help your case. And that's going to
mhm,
turn to actions faster and help you defend faster and keep your company safe, which should be our goal.
yeah. Um, so while I was prepping for it, I had like AI kind of generate like uh, a sample set that'll kind of show um, what I was trying to show in this. So this is not important. This is just how I was able to connect get the data for this. Um, we can skip this just like the timeline of what happened or what was supposed to happen here. But the first concept here is frequency distribution, right? How often does each value appear, right? Um, you can count how many times does this user log on in a day. Um, how many times do you connect to a particular endpoint? How many times do you do certain things, right? Just kind of count that number. Um, and once you're able to plot that on a graph or visualize it, it's easier to spot um, anomalies, right? Um, so there's a concept called like I think it's called long tail analysis, where you plot your graph and then you look at what is on the end tail of that graph, right? So, for instance, we can do um, most visited domains within a particular organization, right?
Yeah.
For the most part, everybody will be visiting similar, right? Um, so you'll probably see google.com, you probably see the actual website of the company, you see a lot of things that will be very common to the organization. But then towards that end of that long tail, there'll be like one domain that only one user or one device is connected to, right? That should be able to start like make you think, okay, what is going on here? Why is it just in the entire organization of like thousands of computers, thousands of employees, only one guy is connecting to this domain? It might not be suspicious. It might just be like a one-time thing, but it should be something that you want to find an answer to. Okay, why this is right. Um, and so again, most of the concept that we'll talk about here is never like a definitive, oh, this is proof of like malicious activity. No, it's just, oh, this is interesting. Let me go find out why this is happening, right? And you can either prove that, oh, it's normal, or um, something bad is actually going on. And so looking at here for our authentication event for this our fake company, where we see that for login events, most of the things happen between working hours, right? Between 8 to 4 or 5 p.m., right? Um, if you take a graph of most organizations that just work 8 to 5, it will be kind of similar to this, right? Um, and so we can have like this is our baseline, and let's say for some reason we spot something happening outside that, then it should be something that we should go and find and ask, oh, why is this user logging on at 1 a.m., at 2 a.m., at 3 a.m., right? Again, this is super simple stuff, but um, it can just kind of help like surface quick wins easily for us. So,
I definitely do support this. At my daily job, almost every time I'm looking at, a log source or some data, I'm always looking at the rare fields. I mean, that's an actual command in Splunk. And
mhm,
that to me reveals the juiciest information because, 70 or 80% of the logs are kind of standard or normal, but then you catch one thing or two things that, that are suspicious, and then you can proceed with that.
yeah, for sure. Um, and so for our scenario here, we see that um, there were some interesting events, right? 47 failed logins, um, around 1 to 3 a.m., right, for this particular user. Um, and you see that like if you're able to plot that, it kind of breaks the shape of what we saw previously, right? For what we saw previously, everything happened between that 8, 7 to like 4, 5, right? But then this activity um, around 1, 2 a.m. breaks a shape. And so again, this shape here that is broken is something that we need to go find an answer to. Oh, why was this user logging on at 1, 2 a.m. and 47 failed attempts? Like definitely something you want to go find why this is happening. Maybe it's a legitimate thing. Maybe they were just trying to get on one night, get in the morning and just kind of get some things done. Maybe, right? Who knows? But again, this kind of like surfaces like quick wins for you. It could be authentication event. It could be domains visited. Um, it could be DNS queries, like things like that that you can easily like count stuff easily. Um, yeah, definitely look at you said like the refuge, see what is happening the least in this environment, right? And then you can go and answer the questions because for the most part, attackers or threat actors they'll always be going against the norm, except you're dealing with some kind of like sophisticated like nation state or big threat group, right? For the most part, everyone they'll be going against the norm of what people in the organization do. And so if you're able to spot that, um, quick and easy win for sure. And then actually this is one of my favorite ones because it's like so simple. Um, like central tendency. So basically just this describing what is uh typical in a data set. Um, we learned this back when, right? Average, median, and mode. And you might think like, how does this help me in threat hunting, right? But the thing is, these these values they help define what is typical, right? So, um, let's say you let's say you work 40 hours every week, right? If I was to take the average of your working hours for the month, it would probably be 40, right? If I should order your login hours and take the median, it'll probably be 40 as well, right? Um, if I take the most occurring figure, it would probably be 40 as well. Um, um, but let's say for some reason you had like a huge incident at work and you
Uh-huh.
had to work like 80 hours a week, maybe just for that 1 week out of the month. Um, your mean is going to be affected because when you take the average of that, your mean is going to be pulled towards that anomaly, that 80, right? Probably like 60, 50 around that. However, your median and your mode, they're gonna stay the same because they're resistant to like outliers, right? Um, so now if we take this to again like a security point of view, right? Let's say you take an average of again authentication events, kind of like simple, right? The average of when um, Richie logs into his computer every week. Assuming he's working regular 8 to 5, his average logon time probably like around 8, right? 8, 8:30, whatever. His median mode probably stay the same. Um, but let's say his account got compromised and somebody in a different time zone who was not careful logged in at 2 a.m. Richie's time, right?
Yeah.
And kept on doing that like throughout the week. If I was to take an average of Richie's login time at the end of the month, it's not gonna be that time it was. It's gonna be pulled towards when the attacker was logging in. And so just simple things like this, like spotting that like that, that discrepancy between your mean and your median can help you spot um, anomalies within your data set. So once you get the baseline of this is what normal looks like, and you're able to within the time frame of what you're of when you're investigating, see there's something that looks different from that, right? Let's say for the first 3 months of the year, um, this was the baseline, right? Logs in at 8 a.m., whatever. Again, this could apply to anything, really, but this is just kind of simple, a simple concept to look. Logs in at 8 a.m. Assuming that account got compromised and the attacker kept on logging in at, let's say, 2, 3 a.m. every day for a week, and you take um, an average of that, it's gonna be different from what the baseline was at. And then that is something you need to go find, oh, why did this happen? Why was this happening? Again, this is just gonna be like leading you to find answers to questions, basically. Um, I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, definitely. By running these calculations and seeing what's standard, and then when you have something that's standard and a baseline, something that deviates from that baseline, that's a red flag. And that's something
Yeah,
worth looking into.
yeah, for sure. And then mean median mode, it sounds kind of simple, but like you can use it to find like oh interesting things like that if you have a good baseline already for sure. Um, so this kind of what I'm explaining. So for a good account in this organization, right, they logged on 15 times a day, right? They logged in, get up, came back to the computer, logged in again, right? Whatever. Uh, Again, this is just fictitious. Um, we take their mean, median, and their mode, and it's relatively close. It's relatively close, right? So we can kind of trust that there's nothing weird, there's nothing suspicious or anomalous going on here. Just because the mean, the median, and the mode, they all agree with each other, right?
Yeah.
Um, so we can kind of trust this. But if you go to the next slide here, um, we can see again. I love graphs because it's easy. I'm a visual learner, so I can spot stuff like visually that way. Um, and so we look at on the left here is like the normal account, um, everything kind of close to each other. However, when we look at the compromised account, we see that there was one day that the login count like shot up, um,
Mm.
and that's like different from whatever was happening previously.
Yeah.
Um, so that that calculation of like central tendency, the mean and the median, that discrepancy between two of them, again, can help surface things that is um, worth our attention, I'd say. So,
I see. So usually alerts like this at the companies I've worked for, they turn into risk-based alerts.
yeah.
Like yeah, like one individual instance of like an increased login. If you start alerting on that, it's going to be extremely noisy. But by aggregating and using this sort of statistics, you're able to reduce alerts, but also catch what you need to catch. For example, like Jay Smith would alert a risk-based alert, like um, a huge number of logins.
Okay. The next one here is standard deviation, and it basically just kind of answers the question, how how spread out is your data around the mean, around the average, right? Um, so a smaller standard deviation means your data is kind of like close together and it's predictable behavior. A larger standard deviation means like your values are like spread out and they're wide apart. Um, Now this is the soccer reference that I was alluding to here. So assuming there are two strikers, right? They score an average of um 15, 20 goals a season for like 5 seasons, right?
Yeah.
Um, the first striker, he's scoring 20, 21 goals, 22 goals every season, right? Um, and the other striker, first season scores like five, second season scores like 30, and it's kind of like fluctuating here and there, right? Now,
Yeah.
if you just take the average of both strikers, oh, they're pretty much the same strikers because they score an average of 20 goals both each. But then if you're to look at the standard deviation of both of them, you see that the first striker, the one whose goals were more closely, he's gonna have like a smaller standard deviation. And the
Yeah.
other one who was like 5 this season, 30 this season, 20 or 10, 8, whatever, his standard deviation is gonna be larger, right? Now, if as a coach or as a manager or as the owner of a club and I wanted to buy a striker into my team,
Mm.
I want to go for the striker that is more consistent,
Yeah.
right? I know that I can always expect 20 goals from him every season, even though on paper he and the other guy might have the same average, but um, who is more consistent? Um, that's what um, standard deviation can help us answer, right? For certain activity, if we're able to um, calculate a standard deviation for that, if it's a small one, we can trust that this is very predictable. This is a very predictable data. This is very reliable data. However, if we have a standard deviation that's wide apart, that is very wide, um, it's like this is very variable. And again, that could be a normal thing, right? That could be a normal thing. But again, if you have a baseline previously, this can always help you try to find answers to, oh, what's going on here for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think anybody that like enters security, they should baselining is so important because every company is different. Every company has different activities, but and it's not really your job to like know every single activity, but by understanding the baseline and knowing how the behavior of these certain things are, that's going to help you immediately spot out a bad pattern.
Yeah. I did want to interject and say that it is kind of difficult when you start getting hands-on with trying to calculate and utilize standard deviation, especially now that remote work is so big, because
Hmm.
I log into my computer at 3 in the morning one day, or 6 in the morning if I wake up early, right? Like you can't with remote work, it just becomes a lot more difficult. But without getting too much into it, just wanted to state that it is a
Yeah,
challenge that we deal with. It's, in theory, it sounds great, but I just wanted to say that when it comes to actually creating the queries, the equations to calculate these things, it can get messy.
Yeah, you could
for
say
sure.
as the
Um,
0 or 30 striker,
All
and I'm the 2020.
right.
for sure. And that's why like it kind of leads to this point. It's gonna be hard to really get accurate and reliable like data if you compare the larger organization because again, so different, right? For us as security guys, we always have people on the night shift for most 24/7 SOC, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're taking what somebody's doing in the daytime and what someone's in the nighttime, like your data is gonna be like modded up. And so this is why um while I was preparing this talk and doing some research and talking with people, they were like, oh yeah, it's also important that you're like comparing users to themselves. And not sometimes to a larger organization, right? Um, Most of us kind of have shifts that we work in, if that makes sense. Whether you're working night shift or if you're working a day shift or if you're working whatever, most of us usually have a fixed time that we work every month, right? Or every quarter, whatever. Um, and would probably be that same way as humans. We're like creatures of habits. We'll probably be that same way, doing the same thing, even though it's very subconscious, but we're probably doing the same things all over and all over again. Now, if you're able to take that concept and apply it to like certain compared to each individuals, um, it's easier to spot anomalies for them and not like what will be anomaly for the entire organization, right? Again, this is simple stuff. You can apply this to a little bit more complex concept. Um, Assuming that this our fictional organization had the worst uh, detection engineers or what's detection engineering or they're just not doing a good job in like understanding the environment and they say oh um what would be a anomaly or suspicious login for us would be anybody who's logging in outside 8 to 5 or outside 7 to 6. Let's say it was a really bad rule like that. Now assuming they had SOC analysts in the night shift who log in at 12 a.m., what do you think is going to happen?
It's gonna trigger.
Triggering alert all the time, right? But then if we're able to um, kind of like make these calculations around like uh, individuals themselves, or it could be users, it could be computers, it could be servers, right? Whatever individual entity you can make calculations around of, um, then it's easier to spot when things go awry from what um, the actual or normal activity looks like. And um, it's going to be hard to get individual baseline. It's going to be very hard. And so something else that we can do is maybe look at clustering, right? That's something we hear a lot in threat hunting, like taking a cluster, right? So maybe take a cluster of users um, in a building or in a department or on a shift, or take computers within the same organization and unit in AD, or computers within the same VLAN, whatever, kind of cluster that. Um, you're probably going to see similar behavior across the table. And so um, if you cannot have what's it called, like individual baselining, you can always use like clustering, right? Instead of having the entire organization as a whole kind of cluster into like smaller groups, and it won't be as accurate as individual, but it would definitely be better um, than doing it, what's it called, across the larger organization for sure. Um, and we kind of see here what this user's account was supposed to be like logon base, um, baseline. So average here is around like 830, right? Makes sense. And then there's this math rule. It's called the empirical rule, or 68, 99, or 97 or something like that. But basically, it states that um, in a data set, 68% of our standard deviation is gonna of our data is gonna fall within one standard deviation, um, and 95% of our data will fall within two standard deviations, and 99% of our data will fall within three standard deviations. So our plan does here average 830. If we want to look at one standard deviation away, we're gonna just look at um, 30 minutes away from either side, right? So one standard deviation will be between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock, right? Um, and two standard deviation will be between 7:30 and 9:30, and three standard deviation will be between 7 and 10. Right? That's what normal should look like. If we should take all the logon times of this particular user, we're gonna see that 99% of their logon time will be between 7 and 10 a.m. This is what is mathematically possible or expected to happen. Now, when we see things that kind of going outside of this three standard deviation, then that's like it becomes very, very mathematically sus, if that makes sense, because the math should say 99% of this should fall within um, this certain number. But when we have a particular value that is going outside of that number, then the math the math is making you ask a question like, what the heck is going on here, right? Um, Again, there are certain things that it might be hard for us to see as humans or just kind of spot easily. But this is why I like math, because it can just kind of help you like suffer stuff like that easily, right?
Yeah.
So
And
even
going
though
back
it might not look like bad on the top, but yeah.
going back to communication, like taking into account what a user's role is, like what department they're part of and what their behaviors are, is something like we security people do almost automatically. But oftentimes saying it and explaining it and putting it on paper, during an incident or like passing it on to somebody, you need to communicate using proper technical terminology and even go as far as showing statistics to prove your point. Because as someone who's like super locked into security, yeah, you're gonna like sort of brush over all the context that you've built up over years of looking at
Hmm.
people's behaviors. But when it's somebody new, you're gonna have to use this to back it up so they can understand. And that, I mean, that's why I think math is beautiful.
Yeah, I'm a nerd, so I like I like stuff like that. But to be honest, the best threat hunters, the best um, detection engineers out there, they really understand the environment, and they take time to understand the environment in which they're hunting in. They're not just going in um, blindsided, right? They make sure they understand the terrain, the landscape, and then once you understand your environment properly, then it's easy to spot what um, an anomaly might look like for you, right? So The next concept here is z-scores, which is just a natural transition from standard deviation. But basically, standard deviation is looking at the entire data set as a whole. And what z-score does is look at each individual value within that data set and defines it in terms of standard deviation, right? So remember we talked about, oh, this is one standard deviation away from the mean, right? That's what a z-score is. A z-score is basically saying that, oh, this particular value is one standard deviation away, two standard deviation away, three standard deviation away, right? But standard deviation is just like the general data set as whole. But z-scores is just like looking at it um, specifically here. And then when I mentioned the whole empirical rule, the 68%, 95%, and 99.7%, 99% will be between three standard deviations. So three three standard deviation plus your average, or three standard deviations away from your average, right? It's gonna be around that. When you start to see things that is on the fringes of like four, five, six, then you start like, okay, this is very, very weird. This is not going along with the um with what's normal. Um Now something to note for here for Z scores, for us to get like accurate Z score data is um we have to have we have to um have a sample set of greater or equals to 30. Um Now why 30? It's kind of based on two math two statistical concept. The first one is the law of large numbers, which kind of says that the larger the larger your sample set, the closer you're going to be to what your true population mean or average is, right? Um, so let's say we're taking um, let's say we're taking the average. I'm trying to think of something here. Let's say we take um, the average time it takes to drive to work. Let's say an organization trying to take the average time it takes to drive to work for people within their environment, right? From this general location to the office location, right? Um, let's say they take an average of two, three employees and they get an average of 10 minutes, right? They could just, oh yeah, that's fine. Um, but then for them to actually be accurate, they will need the entire population of people living within that area to work or to that general work area, right? Sometimes you might not be able to get the entire population, right? That's why a lot of statistics deals with like sample sets, sample data, because sometimes it's just impossible to get the actual entire population data. And so to kind of like compensate for that, we need to use smaller samples, and for sample sets to be accurate or close to accurate, we need to have um, a sample size of greater or equals to 30. Anything less than 30 is not going to be um, enough to give us like accurate data, but like 30 and above, we start to get a little bit more accurate data. So basically, the larger the sample set, the closer we are going to be um, to what the actual population average is, right? And then the other one is the central limit theorem, which is important for z-scores because z-scores assume that the population is a normal shape. And by normal shape, I mean like the bell curve. So it starts out here, goes up, and then comes down, right? So part of like the requirements to calculate like accurate z-scores is the original population has to be a normal population. Again, we might not know what the entire population is, but we can compensate for that by having a sample size of greater or equals to 30. And so whenever we're doing like statistical based like hunts like this, it's important that when where our data set is is sufficient. Greater or equals to 30 is what we need. If we're looking at logons, 30 or more logons. If we're looking at individuals, 30 or more individuals. Whatever we're looking at, it has to be a sufficient size. We can't just take 5, 10, 15 and say, oh yeah, we're good. Like we're not gonna get statistically accurate data from that. Um, so just kind of like something to know here. Um, and so here doing like the calculations for, let's say we had done all this investigation, we found the time that all of this happened. We did a z-score calculation for that logon time. We see that is like 12.58 standard deviations from what um, this user account's personal mean is. And that's like, it says like statistically almost impossible because 99% of your data should be between 3 standard deviations. But we're seeing that this particular activity is so far out from what should be normal for this user. Um, Again, this is something that we need to start to again find answers to, like why did this happen or what is going on here. Um, so I don't know if you guys um, have any questions or
No, that makes complete sense. It makes sense to have a large data set, so you have an accurate picture of the baseline, and then it also makes sense why this guy's getting caught right now. It's just way too.
yeah, yes. So yeah, you see like again that 99% of his data should be between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. But then you have the 2 a.m. one that's kind of like way out here. Um, and so again, it might not be suspicious, but definitely something you need to go find. Um,
Yeah,
Definitely something you
if
need
that's
to
the
go
case,
find answers to.
like even if it isn't a threat actor, you try to reach out or you look at
Mhm.
where his logins are going or why he's doing it, and that also satisfies your own thirst for knowledge, right? Like you're curious what happened, um, and that's gonna help you profile for the future.
Yeah. So um, for this one is starting to get a little bit more specific to security concept. Um, Coefficient of variation. Um, Again, kind of like other stuff we are talking about previously, just gonna help you spot anomalies. Is just how random or is this activity. Um, for most human activity, right? You go browse, you get up, go to the bathroom, go get a drink, go talk to your coworker. Like again, it's all over the place. It's never uniform like this. However, if there's a compromised endpoint within your organization that is communicating back to C2, let's say the settings and that were just, oh, beacon every 30 seconds, every 5 minutes, right? That is going to produce a very low um, coefficient of variation. And that should be like something that should um, kind of catch your attention. I have a I have Splunk server running here that I wanted to show that real quick. If it'll work here. I know demo gods always do their thing, but let's see if they'll be on our side today.
Kind of how like so like regular like human activity, right, all over the place. Um, but then when we look here at um, the beaconing activity, I should grab that here real quick. Uh, let's see where it go. So when we look here at the beacon activity, we kind of see that it's a little bit um, more uniform um, than a regular like human browsing activity we kind of saw earlier. Um, and basically, most like C2 detection frameworks are like under the belt.
The last concept here is uh, PCR or producer consumer ratio. and it was first put forward by Bullard and Girth in FlowCon 2014. Um, Basically, it's a way of spotting exfiltration activity within your environment, right? Um, Most devices within your network, they have a PCR identity. Either like they're purely consumers or they're purely producers, right? Um, and looking at this scale here, like a pure consumer will always be downloading data. Um, it's very hard to see that, but um, in this case, purely negative one, purely consumer. Purely positive one um, is a pure producer, right? You're always sending data, never receiving of any sort. But for the most part, um, most user workstations will probably be between negative zero point 0.5 to a negative 1. Um, and then for most servers, will be on the positive side. Um, Now, the identity here is important, um, but what's really important is the change in identity, right? So what would be weird is um, a device that was purely a consumer switching to become a purely a producer, right? That's like what is Andy's computer doing from just being a regular user workstation to somehow becoming a server, sending data um, to another computer or to an external endpoint, right? Again, that should be something that should warrant our attention. The identity is important, but what is even more important is that switch when it goes from being almost purely a consumer um, to being a producer. And then uh, looking at the kind of calculations for this one was kind of interesting, but because for PCR, it depends on your vantage point. Where are you looking at the uh, the data transfer from? So if I'm looking at it from externally, if a device within my network is staging data to eventually like exfil out of my network, right? I might not see that because I'm looking at that. I'm looking at um, the perimeter, right? But the whole staging is happening within my internal network. Um, but then if there's data exfiltration outside, then I'll see that. So it depends on like kind of like what your vantage point is for that, right? So um, if you're looking at within that network, you can see um, that device kind of like switching its identity and like almost becoming a pure consumer, right? It's just receiving data from some other server within your environment, right? And then you can also spot that when it starts to exfiltrate that data out um, to an external endpoint. So um, again, what is important here for PCR is not just what the value is, but the change in value, right? Again, if it's changing like slightly like this, 0.8 to 0.7, right? No, normal. Maybe some days they're downloading more than others or whatever, or they're sending more emails than others or whatever. But what would be interesting for us would be it moving from like a negative 8.0 or negative 7 here to almost a positive 1. And that's something that is like, why is this happening? Um, then we can go investigate. And another thing to um, be aware of here um, is the vantage point, like where are we looking at that activity from? If you're looking at it from the perimeter, we will not see um, internal data being staged for eventual exfiltration. So just kind of sound like something to keep in mind for sure. And here again, just graph because I like to visualize stuff. So um, just again graph so we can move on here. And this is just kind of like summary of basically the skill chain timeline and how some of the statistical concepts we've talked about here were able to kind of help us see what was happening. Um, the frequency distribution helped us spot like the brute force activity and the anomaly anomalous authentication event. Um, and then the PCR um, section of this showed us data exfiltration, and then the coefficient of variation point, we're able to spot like beacon activity. Again, this is not like super hard widget, like it's math you can apply to literally almost anything. So depending on your data set, depending on what you're looking for, you can apply these things as well. You just need to know what data set am I going to be using to work with this and what fields do I need for my investigation, basically. Um, again, just summary for here so we can move on.
Wait, I think I should say real quick. Yeah, you said this sort of math applies to, everything even outside of cybersecurity. I was just thinking of like the transportation industry where so many boxes don't end up in the right place or so many thefts happen. For example, if a truck was, bringing in just importing a bunch of shipment and then randomly it started exporting or its standard deviations, the timing changed, that would again be detecting an anomaly. And we'd go see what is that truck driver doing? Why are there missing shipments? Why are there different timings? Yeah, so this applies farther than just cyber.
Yeah, for sure. And this is the thing about math, you can apply to a lot of things, right? So just kind of three things to know here. I like the point that Richie brought up about it's very hard to do that like larger organization where like standard deviation calculations, right? So um, it might be better if you do it per entity, right? Per user, per device. But again, that's going to be hard as well. And so if you can cluster, so take similar groups together, um, and then you can perform your calculations in that. Um, and applying these three tools, right? To kind of know, knowing where each of these calculations um, may give you false positives or may not give you like accurate data, right? Um, and where you can apply them, right? So CV for beacon detection and PCR for like that traffic direction shift kind of spot exfiltration activity and kind of knowing where to break like Z scores if the baseline is dirty. Let's say what we're using as like a baseline is already compromised, then we're already getting like inaccurate data from the get-go. Um, and making sure that our sample size is greater or equals to 30. Again, that's super important for the math to be accurate. Um, and then knowing where this breaks, right? So the coefficient of variation would start to be a bit harder to use when attackers implement like jitter or delay into their C2 infrastructure. Um, again, but there are ways to kind of spot this. And I would say look at what like active countermeasures you are doing with like their retail tool and their AC Hunter tool, because those tools kind of like specifically um, focus on that. So yeah, definitely check out active countermeasures, the malware of the day, anything that has to do like Reader or AC Hunter, and also check out um, his name is Mehmet Ergen. I can share my screen here. We can show you his talk. He talked about um, using math to hunt for C2. And it was in the science DFIR. Um,
I think I remember.
some
I think I remember that. C2 beaconing. Yeah, I remember that talk.
Is this fun?
his,
No.
his goal in the industry in terms of threat hunting and detection engineering. Um, the little here. Come on, just having a bad day today.
Yeah, no, you can link it and we'll make sure everyone's able to see it.
Mehmet.
Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
see it. Okay.
Yeah, so this is the talk. Definitely check it out. And he's the one who won.
Yeah.
When you share your screen, I think the bandwidth goes down, so it starts cutting.
Oh, Yeah, today's not my good day for sure.
No, we're good. We're
That's
good. We're
that's
good.
fine. You can still continue. We'll just edit it.
Um, so yeah, definitely check out that talk and basically what he does and what active kind of measure to do with their read on the AC Hunter to kind of like spot for how to still find beat C2 beacon activity, regardless of whether they use jitter or delay and all of that stuff. And then PCR, like if the attackers are very smart and trying to be stealthy, like they're not exfiltrating like a lot of data at a go, they're taking it little by little. Um, that will make like very small changes that might be hard to kind of notice. And so this is where like you have to use multiple different concepts to kind of spot like outliers, right? Because even if they're trying to exfiltrate data like slowly, if you had spot them using some other like mathematical concept, then it doesn't matter at the end of the day, right? So just kind of like knowing how to use these tools and where they'll be most helpful in, and knowing like where they break, where they would give you false positives or might be able to see like the bigger picture, and knowing how to kind of like counter that. It also is very super important. But it's kind of like what I have to share today.
Yeah. I think what you talked about is super underrated because I'm thinking about the incident response lifecycle and preparation, like the first step that everyone tells you to understand. You're actually doing a lot of preparation work by setting up these statistical models, and what I'm really learning from you is especially like users and endpoints, like profile them, understand their behavior, and then using statistics, see where that behavior deviates, and then set alerts on that. And I think that's really effective. And I think a lot of companies would like to have you, Eddy, because for all the companies I've worked, we've had like rudimentary statistic setups, and very often those alerts are just like false positives, unfortunately. And I really think that's because there's not a lot of people like statistics and security at the same time. So if you're in there and you're tuning this properly, I think uh, the progress you're going to make is very valuable for companies that have so many endpoints and so many users and different behaviors. They really need somebody like you. And to other threat hunters and just people in the SOC or security in general, this is how you deal with scale, uh, is using math because you can't account for every single little change that happens multiple times a day. So thank you so much for being on here, Eddy. And honestly, I hope you keep improving on this and we get to have you again, because I ended up
For
learning a lot.
sure. Yeah, if I have something interesting to talk about again, I'll definitely try to do that. But yeah, again, my life kind of revolves around cyber soccer. So if I'm not doing something cybersecurity related, I'll probably I'll probably play soccer. Or as you can tell, watching anime. But
Yeah.
um, honestly, I love what you guys are doing. Um, uh, I feel like a lot of people in our field, they're very much keyboard warriors. They just like to be on the computer doing their own thing. Never really have time to reach out to people like that. Kind of get to learn from other people as well. You guys are doing like an amazing job with that, and um, I think it's really cool. I think it's amazing for sure, and I'm grateful that you guys reach out to me for me to talk about this. So I appreciate it.
No, we thank you for being so patient. Yeah, our life's kind of crazy.
Just for context, like I don't really want to include this, but we ended up ghosting this guy like 4 times because just scheduling conflict. We're in a new country, but this guy every single time he's like, "Let's do it, let's do it, let's do it." Uh, and thank you so much for being persistent with us, um, because I'm super happy to release this as soon as I can.
Yeah. Um, if there's anything you want to share regarding your links, any resources you have, send them.
What
You can,
positions you're looking for, any sort of that stuff, we'd like to shout you out.
yeah.
Well, nice. Yeah, yeah. Whatever position that I can do good work and know that I'm stopping bad guys. Yeah, for sure. That's kind of what I'm looking for. I like that thrill of, oh crap, something is going down. I gotta find these guys. So
That's
bit
it.
of a adrenaline junkie that way.
Yeah.
All right, thanks so much. We'll cut the recording now.